Welcome everyone to the Electrical Culture of Safety Livewire program, where we delve into all the complexities of creating a culture of safety within the electric utility industry. In each episode, we feature interviews with subject matter experts, industry leaders, safety professionals, and field personnel from across the industry, where we discuss ways to develop a collective reflection of the perception, attitudes, and shared experiences of the safety culture within our industry. Welcome to ECOS Livewire.
Good afternoon, Electric Culture of Safety line team. Welcome aboard. We have a very special guest for the Livewire story 031. A good friend of mine. I've known him for several years now, Mr. Danny Rains. Huge amounts of experience. And I want you all to listen to his Livewire story. It's super important as he has so much experience and the stories that he's going to share a little bit today of. But I want to read you his biography first before we get started. Education, 2003, graduate from Georgia Power Professional Development Supervisors Program. 1992, First Line Leadership, Southern Company College. 1985, Foreman Development Program. 1977, Macomb State College, Associate Business Administration. Then Mr. Danny starts working, man. He's 67 to 85. He's a helper, WTO, apprentice, lineman, double dispatcher, lineman, lead lineman, crew leader, Macon Division. And 1985 through 1995, distribution supervisor, Metro South Region. This is for Georgia Power. 1995 to June 1997, contract management, lighting services, construction coordinator. And in 97 through 2000, safety and health advisor, senior. 2000 and 2003, safety and health supervisor. Then we're coming up here. 2003, 2005, safety and training supervisor, project manager. 2005, 2007, safety consultant, Georgia Power Distribution and Transmission Organizations. And then in 2022, December, so three years ago, Danny published the personal history. And I think everybody should grab a hold of this book. I have it personally, and that's Legends of an Ole Lineman right here. And we're going to talk about this with Danny a little bit, his experiences. But listen to why he did this. A book based on my early years in the business and learning to be a skilled lineman until I was promoted into management and supervision, eventually to safety consultant for distribution and transmission for Georgia Power, 9,200 employees. But I want you guys to listen to this real quick. And this is, this is why he wrote the book. It's a collection of stories from lessons learned and mistakes made as I progressed my career at Georgia Power. Applied for and award a position as helper on line crew immediately after graduating high school, and retired after 40 years as safety consultant for distribution and transmission for Georgia Power Company. After lineman, I was awarded crew supervisor, safety and training, and finally a safety consultant's position for the company. After retiring from GPC, I founded Rains Utility Safety Solutions, and I'm currently the owner and principal consultant. Now, he wrote this book for the purpose that as he would share his experiences, that we, as the student and reader of his book, that we would learn from his experiences. And a lot of things you'll see, folks have made mistakes, including Danny from time to time, like all of us, right? So he's a professional experience, December 1st, 2007 till present, affiliate instructor of Georgia Tech, OSHA Outreach, and GTRI in Atlanta, Georgia. USOLN, USOLN, and IP committees were developing and presenting the ANSI Certified Utility Safety Professional CUSP certification, CUSP. Retired from Georgia Power Company with 4 years of experience in electrical utility construction, supervision, and corporate safety training. He founded Rains Utility Safety Solutions, and he's called me a few times while he was out doing some consulting and live. So that was kind of fun to be part of that too, a little bit. But anyways, hey, check this out. This year, Danny was inducted to the Lineman Hall of Fame. Man, that's awesome. Contributing writer for Incident Prevention Magazine since 2008. So, Mr. Danny, thank you for coming on board, brother. Thank you.
It's my pleasure to be here, Brent. It's always an honor for me, and humbles me a little bit for someone to ask me to speak about, the industry and, of course, my experiences. And I've got 100 different stories I could tell you, but I've tried to pick out one or two that really hit home with me. But yes, glad to be here. Glad to be anywhere at my age.
Hey, you're looking pretty good there, Danny. Things are starting to heal up, and some of the doctors are working on you from little tweaks and little gadgets in your body. You're feeling better.
Oh yeah. Well, it's I'm retired and replaced. Body parts, the original parts is worn out, so they started replacing things.
Yeah.
And what I didn't hurt in myself when I was working, on line crews, I guess age, just birthdays got them. So, I got it all working again right now, and I don't know how long it'll last, but hopefully it'll last a little while.
Well, I want to get in your book, Legends of an Ole Lineman. I believe you started a second printing of it, correct?
Yes, it is actually, it hit the market yesterday or day before.
Really?
Yeah, I was advised to do something. I kind of cut that book off that you're holding there.
Yeah.
When I left line crews and went into supervision. So after conversing with publishers, and I changed publishers, but they said, well, why don't you just carry it till you retire at Georgia Power? And then I'm beginning to write a sequel now of the 18 years of consulting I've been doing since I left Georgia Power. So that's why there's two different versions. There's two different covers to the book. You'll see it's very similar. The second book, the second edition of that Legends of Ole Linemen, it's got about an extra 20,000 words in it. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah, so we just lengthened it on out and had a few things. And of course, my God, after all these years, I could talk forever and write, but I didn't want the book to look like a Webster's dictionary. So I kind of cut it short, and I put everything in there that I'd like to put in there. But it was a lot of fun to go back and, revisit all these things. And it's like Vicki, my wife, says. She says, you can't remember what I told you yesterday, but you're writing in that book what you did 50 years ago. And I said, well, it is what it is. But it's an interesting read. It's real, nothing fiction about it whatsoever. When I was wrong, I told you I was wrong. So, but that's how I learned. And thank God I had some really good, experienced people, worked for a great company. And I did not realize that until I actually retired and went to the marketplace. And then I'm going, okay, I thought everybody was doing about the same thing. But as I've told many people in many classes I teach, about the only thing we do that's consistent with other utilities, co-ops, contractors, municipals, is a big end of the pole goes in the ground. And once you get the pole set, whatever how you want to frame it and do it, whether you use NESC or APPA, I don't care. It doesn't matter. The 12240 is going to come out the other end and serve customers.
Yeah. So, a lot of the folks don't realize, Danny, that you're one of the first folks, you, Jimmy Vaughn, and Mac Turner, one of the first folks that I came to with the idea of electric culture of safety about 4 years ago. And you were right in on it. In fact, you were essentially the very first presenter with 002 electric systems grounding. And it's close to 2 hours long. And the details, the videos you share and the details regarding grounding, to me, it's essential that the folks get that video. And then you came 2024 and you shared Insulate and Isolate, Proper Distribution Cover Up, A History of Gloving. And that was episode 042. And then next week, you're going to be coming with episode 085, and you're going to be sharing. And this is a good one. I like this one. And this is, to me, this is going to be super interesting to me because I've been around contractors, and let's just say that. And this is contractor management. You laughing, you know. And this is contractor management. So I'm very interested in this. It's a whole different topic. We never heard anybody talk about this. So I'm excited to hear that this coming up week, man.
Well, and kind of give you a little background on that topic. One of the last things I had to do at Georgia Power before I retired is that, you know, the 1999 multi-employer citation policy came out in 99, of course, as a result of some things that happened, not necessarily in the electric utility industry, but just contractors in general working for a host contractor. And then all of a sudden they said, well, wait a minute, what's the legal obligations, ramifications of contractors working on our system? Who's responsible for what? Who trains? Who oversees? Who supervises? And as a result of that, like I say, at Georgia Power, we put together a program there. I did the safety side of and the regulatory side of it, and trained almost 2,000 people at Georgia Power that had anything to do with contractor management, as far as writing the contracts, securing contracts, overseeing, inspecting, coordinating contract and work, and then review. And then, so it was a big project. I enjoyed it. It took over a year to do it. I had to go from one end of the state to the other, and I don't know how many meetings. I lost count of the meetings, but it's you'll find it be a pretty interesting program and a lot of information that's good not only for contractors but for host employers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's cool. I went to it was interesting a couple of years ago. A large utility, investor owned in Texas, put together a back to basics safety summit. And what was interesting is they invited, and there was about 6 different contractors, and they invited their contractors that worked on their system, very large system, and about 6 different contractors. And what they did is they had each contractor, it was interesting, they had each contractor present a topic. And it was very interesting seeing all these folks together, different, I mean, you know as well as I know, different cultures, right?
Oh,
and different ways, different systems, the work methods, the practices, the work practices, everything, as you know, is slightly different from one organization to another. But it was interesting being part of that and watching them co-mingle. It wasn't a lot of friction, but it was interesting perspectives, listening to each one share their perspective and hearing the other stories. Very interesting.
Oh yeah, and the biggest thing that, and I find it today as I go out and I do contract management a lot and accident investigation, and they kind of commingle. A lot of times the accidents occur and the host wants to know what happens, and of course they have a right to actually investigate and find out what happened. But what's I guess one of the largest meetings I had lately was with a state association, and of course they have about as many contractors working on the different cooperative systems in that state as they do employees, or maybe even more. But the differences of opinion on how to manage the contract crews while they're actually performing the work is what was the most interesting thing. And unfortunately, and God forbid, there was a fatality occurred. Well, when that happened, that's when the opinions really came to light, and everybody had their opinion. So the state association asked me to put together a program, which I already had. And we met at their training center and probably had 150 people in there from different ones. All the federated insurance was there for, they insure most of the co-ops or many of the co-ops. Lawyers for everybody were there. There was more lawyers than there was linemen, I think. But once I once I showed them the program that I presented, and it kind of aired out and kind of highlighted some of the mistakes that were being made in contract management, managing the contract by contractors. And a lot of people just don't know, they don't understand the legal aspects of it, but not necessarily the OSHA regulatory part of it, but they don't understand the legal ramifications when it comes to tort liability lawsuits. And that really, that was one of those aha moments for sure.
Yeah, that's an amazing thing as far as trying to get the organizations within, let's say, for an example, the statewide association, whether it's a municipality or a cooperative, trying to get to some sort of consensus on standardizing the practices of what you're going to do when you're doing this. And so that's interesting, trying to get to that consensus and agreement.
Well, next week when I'm up there, hopefully after that program, and that program will probably take about an hour and a half, I guess, something like that. Really depends if you kind of opened it up for questions, Q&A for people to call in or ask. You might even run a little longer, because it always points out some things that, hey, we're not doing that, or I ain't never done that before. Everybody's heard that before. Well, just because you ain't never heard it and ain't never done it, don't mean you don't need to do it. So, and again, too, the most disturbing thing to me, and I've had to testify in a lot of cases and investigate a lot of accidents in the last 15, 20 years. And they don't understand about the tort liability, the responsibility of the host for their contract companies, and then how that works in court of law. And that's the scary part.
That's going to be so interesting. And I'll this afternoon, Danny, when we are finished listening to your live wire story, this afternoon, I'll be putting up the announcement on electric culture of safety on LinkedIn and the Facebook, as far as, and it'll also have the link necessary for folks to get in on Teams meeting for next week while you're here. So I'll make sure I get that going.
All right. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah. So I have a few questions around your book, because the experiences are just really cool. But one of them, and this is interesting, Danny, taken back near the front here, the hole on Riverside Drive. And what's interesting is you get through this, you made a comment here that's pretty, to me, it's impactful. Not all were cut out for the work outside in the cold and hot weather, working all hours of the day and night, incredibly long hours, restoring power after storms. I can remember working 24 to 48 hours straight many times. It was tough even for a young man. I can now understand why there are limitations for driving a commercial motor vehicle after being on duty for so long. It is like being under the influence of drugs or alcohol. I have driven to motels after working for 36 hours or more and cannot remember the drive. I would wake up and not know where I was or how I got there. Looking back, it was kind of scary when you think about the tasks we were working on while being that tired. Hence, hours of service are important in today's world.
Yeah, couldn't say that. Well, matter of fact, I did say that.
I did.
You couldn't say it. But it's a fact. I mean, back in the day, and of course, the occasion I was particularly thinking of right there was, some of the early ice storms I worked. And that was, of course, before OSHA and before DOT regulations. Hey, anything went. If you can't hack it, go somewhere else. Go read meters or go go work on trucks. But if you're going to be a lineman, you got to be able to do this. And that was the expectation back in those days. And it's like, holy crap, man. And I know I've been working on the east side of Atlanta, out there off Briarcliff Road. Oh, And we drove all the way from Macon up there, and we got up there and started working, and didn't get up there till mid-afternoon. So we were the night crew. We worked all night long, got off the next morning at 8 o'clock, went and had some breakfast or something, whatever, and got in bed and got to sleep, and that was after and I guess you could say we just complained. We just told them, said, look, there's a limit of what a human being can do. And anyway, it was, work 16, 18, 20 hours was not uncommon back in those days at all. But like I said, when that initial storm hits and everybody's running to it and going to be the hero and get all the lights on, and it takes 3 weeks later and they'll get them on. It's still on the ground when you get there. There's no need of hurry to rush it. You want to get there as quick as you can. But man, there was nothing to work a day and a half without taking a break.
Yeah, that's incredible. Back in the day, when you first started, that there wasn't even more incidences, serious injuries and fatalities than there were at that time.
Well, and today we have this lovely thing called social media that that everybody is more informed about what's going on in other places than they ever have been. I try to keep up with what's going on by just my relationships with companies all over the United States. I mean, I can't hardly go anywhere in any state that I hadn't worked for somebody in that state, and something happens, we kind of share information. But yeah, social media today is really a good thing, and it's really a horrible thing. And I'm not going to go down there and beat anybody up about that, but I see things on social media that should not be on social media. That's all I'm saying. But it is a good way to stay in touch. I mean, I think this year, if you count all the fatalities out there, we're over 30 again. I'm almost sure we are. And maybe more than that. And, vehicle accidents, not just electrical contacts, but everything. We had one accident in North Carolina. 3 or 4 people got killed up there back in the first part of the year, and it was a vehicle accident. So it's sad.
It's incredible, man. It's just hard to take hearing about this. It's almost like weekly you hear something.
Yeah. Well, it's like when I do the distribution cover-up class, and I think you'll remember, they did it was the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and then and other organizations did research for 10 years, and they come up with a 24 to 28 an average. That's a running total for every year. And that mostly was contacts. That's not counting falls and and everything else out there. But I know but I tell you, like I say, I got 100 stories. But yeah. I got a note the other day that I had a memory come back to me, and I was doing a 30-hour class and in Florida for a co-op. And they said, well, do you remember this? And I said, well, yeah, matter of fact, I do. I got through with that class that day and got in the vehicle, left, was driving home. And there were 4 different incidents that morning in 4 different states, and 2 of them were fatalities and 2 of them were severe contacts. That was one day. And I'm going, golly, come on. The sad part about all that is, I had a flash, and that's what I'm going to talk about. That's my story to you guys today. So if you're not careful, you can get into trouble. But if you're doing the majority of things right, wearing the correct PPE and doing like you're supposed to do, you can still have that event happen. It just, have a story to tell, like I'm going to tell y'all in a few minutes. But when you start not doing this, and I don't think I know you need to do that, and this over here, I don't need to do that, I'm not going to be there for a minute. Those are the kind of scenarios that set you up for a catastrophic failure and maybe even fatality.
Yeah. So since you brought it up, Danny, this is your story. You brought it up. Why don't you go ahead and share us of that incident that you experienced in that flash?
Sure. Be glad to. There was a time, there was a big line crew, It's a foreman, 2 linemen, what we call a WTO, winch truck operator, equipment operator, and an apprentice and a helper. The job that morning when we left, my regular lineman that was usually with me, my pole buddy of that day, was off that day. So of course, we all knew each other. I mean, it was one big family. But there's another fellow came in and took his place. And they said, well, we got a pretty tough job today. And they just built a huge facility. There was 4 2,500 kVA transformers lined up on this one big building. And it was a tobacco company. Mm-hmm. They actually literally made cigarettes. And there was 2 riser poles there that fed those 4 transformers. And they said, well, we're going to split this load up. We're going to get it on 2 different circuits. So, and these riser poles were, 2 spans apart the most. So they said, well, what we're going to do is go out here and cut a set of 1,200 amp gang switches in and make sure everything's working, get all that done, and see how it was 750 wire, 750 MCM. And so we went out there that morning and of course untied the phases, got our one shot on our breaker. We were about half mile from the substation. We went out there and got everything laid out, and it was a set of, well, they don't even put switches in like this anymore, but we got the switches out and assemble them on the ground, 3 individual switches, and then we had to hang them and then build the operating arms and the operating handle and everything. So we got in there and set everything up and went up. Gene and I went up and untied phases and took the little 2-post insulator bracket down, left the pole top pin up on the pole, and then we floated the other 2 outside phases out. We hung the arm, got up there and mounted the switches on them and put all the operating mechanisms in there and put the operating handle down, got all that built. And then we got on the field side phase and cut it in first, come up to the middle phase, cut it in first. We were set up on the road side. And once we got the middle phase done and did it in, we did the roadside phase. And of course, all this has been jumped out. We got mechanical jumpers keeping all the power on the circuit. They never knew we were out there. And so as we got everything in place and got the dead ends cut, got the jumpers made, tubular to flats and squeezed up, did everything, we operated the switch. Well, all those old switches like that, you had to have some adjustments on the operating arms and everything else to make everything close like it's supposed to, because you got 3 individual switches and it's a gang operated switch. So we got up there and it took a little while. We'd open and close. We'd find 1/4 inch out and then one, and I don't know, things happen. That's something I can tell you. We finally got everything adjusted. So we operated it 2 or 3 times, said, okay, lock that handle shut. So closed the switch and locked it, and then got up there and started taking the mechanical jumpers off. So we got all 3 jumpers off. So we didn't operate it again because it was, we let the switching order be written down to where they actually going to switch a circuit around and put each circuit on each side of that switch, and each riser was going to be on a different breaker coming out of the substation. So, hey, that was a great job, guys. Everything went fine. Mm-hmm. Well, that's when the ship hit the sand. Then after that, we said, well, while you're out there, the dispatcher, and I'm sure everybody's probably had this happen to them at least once. While you're in that neighborhood, I've got one little thing that needs to be taken care of over here. Okay, what is it? Well, shouldn't have never been. It was a slack span pull off, okay, from a mainline pole about 30 feet over to a dead end pole, and then it took off down Weaver Road off of Cochran Short Route to make it. And what they did, they didn't line the guys up right. Pole's leaning a little bit, slack span. Whenever the wind blows, like it's blowing out there today, every once in a while, phases would bump and you'd operate the breaker. Well, this is an industrial complex out there. This is all kinds of big insurance companies and all kinds of commercial facilities, industrial facilities. We pulled up on the job, and Gene and I got out, and then of course the foreman was off too. So the senior lineman on my crew was blue slipped foreman. He was a temporary supervisor. So we all gathered up. This is 1971. So that we did job briefings, but not like we do today. I'll put it this way. So we looked at it and said, you ain't gonna be able to cover this up, because if you put a gut on this right here or a line hose on this right here, it's gonna roll it right into there. We're gonna flash mid-span, lock, break right. We finished up with that other job, and of course closed that. That was on one breaker, this one. So we went to the station, which was like 4 spans down the street. We got a one shot on the breaker and came back and then started to plan this job. So the plan was, now this, you can imagine it, this is for linemen that's out there in the field, they can appreciate this, I believe. It was a 6-foot steel buck arm, okay, and 2 guys coming off the backside of this pull-off pole, and then the 3 phases that went over to it, slack span, roll vertical to flat. Another thing that should have never been done. I mean, this is one of those, I call it an engineering oversight, but that's okay. The engineers didn't have to work on it. But anyway, we got there, and I told Gene, I said, well, Gene, we can't put no rubber on this. I don't think so. He said, I tell you what to do. And it was so slack. The slack span insulator was sitting up vertical on the steel arm, and the dead end clamp for the slack span was hanging almost down to the arm. And it was just terrible. And I told them, I said, I tell you what, let's do. You hold that phase, hold it up, and keep a little strain on it. I'm gonna get over here, and I did. I took a split blanket, a 36 by 36 split blanket. I wrapped it around the base of the insulator. That was the vertical insulator, and I wrapped around the base of the insulator and covered up the arm. But where was I looking at the whole time I was doing this? I was looking at that flex band right there, 15 feet away. So when I overlapped the split blanket, I left about that much of the steel arm poking through the crack on the finger. So he raised the face up, which brought the clamp up. So I get a wrench. I put a wrench and a 3/4 socket on there to take those nuts loose on that slack span clamps. And I'm watching him, saying, don't shake it too much. And my wrench got against that steel arm. Well, who framed that steel arm, not only did they not do the guys correctly, but they let the hold ground get under the gain on the arm, which now the steel arm becomes the neutral. Okay, so it's tied to the neutral. So when that wrench touched that arm, it was lightning done struck the outhouse. It was bad news. There was a ball of fire. They said you couldn't even sit. 2 buckets just went into a ball of fire up there. We were right in the middle of it. Stopped traffic everywhere, and we locked the breaker out, of course. And so that shut everything down on that road. It was like clearing a train wreck. And I mean, it was terrible. And of course, as soon as it touched, I knew what had happened. It's almost like I could hear it coming before I felt it. And that's pretty quick.
Yeah.
But I knew what I'd done. And I looked down just in time before all the smoke and the fire got in my face. I did have a pair of sunglasses on, but they were not ANSI 87.1, so there was no protection for UV. I did not have an FR shirt on because we didn't wear FR shirts then. It was a Kmart special that you could just about read a newspaper through. And this is one thing that I really want to tell people and explain to them, because the science and the physics behind an arc flash, you ain't going to think. Our business is probably one of the most unforgiving businesses you can be in. In other words, you make a mistake. You told me a lot of things when I went to work at a power company. You make one, you got a story to tell or something else is going on. You make two, you could be on a memorial charge. But that shirt, it just splattered the front of it with porcelain from stripped all the skirts off the insulator, of course. But it didn't set the shirt on fire. And for years and years, I couldn't figure that out. And once I started really, teaching and talking to a lot of people and understanding more, I knew why that it didn't set it on fire. At least I had a reason to believe why it did. Of course, I had my hard hat on, had that shirt, short sleeve shirt, had no sleeves. We didn't wear sleeves, never wore sleeves, but we had a good cover-up program. I had a burn between the top of my glove. We had 18-inch cuff gloves on. I had a burn, second-degree burn between there and my T-shirt sleeve. And underneath the T-shirt sleeve was not burned. That's another thing I couldn't figure out. Or even with the heat transfer. Well, they got us down and, they took us to, and I'll tell you my theory on that in just a second. They got us down. We looked at see what we did, changed the insulator out, and then got the breaker back hot. And then they took Gene and I both to the hospital emergency room for them to check our eyes because they figured it would burn our eyes. But it really didn't. The sunglasses, I don't know whether I closed my eyes in time or whatever, but I had first and second degree burns on the side of my face and on my arm right there. And that's all it was. Now, these were old mechanical relay, GE or Westinghouse mechanical relay. They said there was about 8,000 amps of fault current on that breaker, and it operated in somewhere between 8 and 10 cycles, which is a sixth of a second. So just look at it that way, which seemed like about a week while that fireball was burning. But to go back to the arc, and it dawned on me, and I guess, way back in the days, much later on, a fellow named Hugh Hoagland, which is a good friend of mine at E-Hazard, and we kind of reevaluated this accident here plus some others. And I asked the question, and it dawned on me as to why it wasn't any worse for me than what it was. And Gene, he was to my right, so he was further away from the contact point than I was. But where was the fireball? If it had been right here, arm's length, the end of my hand, where I shorted it out against the steel arm, but the arc actually occurred at the game, where the ground was up underneath. So that's 5 feet away, 4.5 feet. So, if you really look at what science tells us and what physics says, distances and damage is inversely proportional to distance. The further away you are, the better off you are. The closer you are to the arc, that's why all the estimates now are on 18-inch arm's length when it comes to actually determining the category of clothing we wear and the incident energy and everything else. So at the point of contact, or the point of the arc, is where worse it's going to be. So that's why I didn't get hurt any worse than what it was. It amazed me when I found out later, I said, what was the possibilities? What could have happened? I scared the living hound out of me. Needless to say, after that point, I was much more careful about how I covered things up. Because when I first made lineman, I didn't take my rubber gloves off 2 years. That's all I did was reconduct. I got number 6 and put in 750, 397, 795. Just amazing at the difference. But anyway, as time went on, it better. And of course, I got my hand spanked for locking the breaker out of it. But everybody was glad nobody was hurt. We all learned a lesson from it. And that's probably one of the reasons that the company that I worked for was so well, known all over this country for their cover-up program. I mean, you know, they use those cover-up training programs through books and everywhere else. And there's, you know, I don't want to promote a company, but anyway, they're for sale for everywhere. And of course, I use a lot of the same principles when I do the distribution cover-up. But that's one reason that cover-up was so important to us. One, we never wore sleeves. You know, a lot of people, what, 50% of the companies now wear sleeves as a preventive measure to keep from getting burns on the arms. We never did, and we never did have that many flashes. I mean, that was just what I did was almost unheard of at the time. So, but there I go, a story in the book.
No, that's incredible, Danny. And you know, as far as not being necessarily afraid of the electricity, but gaining more respect and being more careful, right? As far as an outcome.
Just understanding what you're dealing with right here is one of the most powerful things, you know, short of being nuclear energy, you know, but it's, like I said, it's very predictable as to the outcome if something goes wrong, but it's also very unforgiving. It'll burn you up in a minute and keep right on going. That generator will never stop turning. You know, so
right.
You may lock a breaker out, but you're not going to shut the system down.
Yeah, you're very fortunate. Your shirt wasn't seen at that distance as fuel. You're very fortunate.
See, just the distance between me and the arc is what saved me, or what made it.
That's amazing.
Eventful.
Yeah, dang. So I got another story here. When you were an apprentice, Danny, you've got this in the chapter. I want to read this here for the folks. I thought this was interesting in your book. Now, there should be no question as to why the OSHA regulations are worded the way they are for protection of the employees. We did not have OSHA regulations then, and it was expected that everyone would do the right thing. No one makes these mistakes intentionally, but mistakes can and do happen because we are all human. That little event could have been deadly, but it was not. I learned a valuable lesson of not making assumptions. So that the assumptions is so big. Opening a switch does not mean that the equipment is now de-energized. It just means the switch is opened. Thank the good Lord for those lessons.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Talk to us about that, Danny, because you know you've heard it said as everybody else has, if it's grounded, it's dead. If the switch is open, you're good.
It's not. Yeah, that's one of the first. That's one of the. They used to tell us a lot of things when we were young helpers and truck drivers and apprentice linemen, and that sign was all over the building. It ain't dead till it's grounded. And then, you know, lo and behold, I found out some 20 years later, you know, or maybe less, but still, you can open the switch all you want to. That just means the switch open. You know, that don't mean it's dead. If you got induced voltages around, you got feedback coming in, you got capacitors somewhere, you got all kinds of possibilities of energy still there. There have been more fatalities. I guess one of the last fatalities we had to investigate with my company was a brand new lineman right out of the school. He was graduated a junior apprenticeship program. He had his journeyman card, and it just, man, I'm ready. I can do anything I want to now. Follow regulations. And bless his heart, he didn't do it. And he made assumptions. He opened something up that he thought fed what he was going to be touching. And then when he got to the job site, he went, they never did check for the absence of voltage. They never did put rubber gloves on. They certainly didn't ground it. If he'd have done any of those three things, he'd probably still be here today. He was 25, 26 years old, just got married. I mean, those are the kind of things that just makes my heart hurt. And it's just so needless. that does not need to happen. Just you know, people talk about OSHA regulation this and OSHA regulation that. What are our OSHA regulations? They're minimum standards. And it's one set of OSHA regulations for every company out there, whether it's Y, Delta, or Y, you know, whether it's a single conductor, earth and ground Y. You know, so there's just one set of regulations for every. Now, who's it up to really make sure that what you're doing is within that regulation, but it's the safest thing you can do, and that's your employer or ever who's in charge of that job site. And that's the part, you know, when you look, I heard 2 fatalities. I mean, I've been did a little traveling the last month. What was the one company had 2 fatalities, and another company that I have worked for in the past more than once had a fatality the next week. So there was 3 fatalities right there in about 10 days or less. And every one of them, if they had just checked for the absence of voltage, had their PPE on, grounded, or all the above, never happened. It never happened. And that's the sad.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, when we're sent to a storm, Danny, it wasn't just a few several years ago. Some apprentices were working storm, and they picked up the tail, and they assumed that it was de-energized, and they were both killed as well. I think it was a storm in Louisiana or Mississippi, maybe several years ago. A hurricane came through. You probably remember that.
Well,
yeah, all the time.
Back in the day, storm work was the safest work we did because we were paying more attention to what we were doing. We were focused on the job. But here lately, now then, things happen on storms, and it's a lot of things happen. We had a fatality right down South Georgia not a storm or 2 ago, and then I don't know. I kind of lose track of them. There's so darn many of them. But when you come to just fatalities, but when you look at contacts or flashes, statistically, if you go do the homework, it's kind of hard to do. But you'll see that there's a contact or a flash just about every week or more, maybe more than one. Why? Cover up, lack of PPE, voltage checking. I mean, verification, test and verify. You know, that's what I tell people all the time: is test and verify.
Yeah,
if you don't
that's the biggest.
Yeah, if you don't test it for the absence of voltage, how do you know it's dead?
That's right.
Don't, because you open a breaker or whatever. Bless their hearts. It's just the young man that got killed in that particular story I just told you. He knew, you know, the bad part, you know, nobody hears except you and I right now. How many people were on that job site? Oh, 3 others. How much time did they have? One of them had 40-something years of line crew.
Yeah.
And he never even mentioned checking the absence of voltage.
Yeah. I don't get it, Danny. I don't get it. Multiple guys and gals on these crews, and they're literally watching the event unfold in front of their eyes, and they say they're their brother's keeper or sister's keeper, and they literally it's like they just stare. Well, and there's no questioning.
A good friend of mine named Bill Martin, you know him. I read a little post he made today, I think it was, and he said, you know, if you look at any event that happens, tragic, catastrophic, or just minor, doesn't matter. If you look at any event, up until the very second that event occurred, everything was exactly normal. And from that point on is when it turned bad. Why can't we see that point before it ever gets here? Why do some linemen feel like, one of the linemen I had in a distribution class, it's been 10 years ago now more, me and Wayne went out to Texas. We did overhead and underground cover up, proper distribution cover up. And at the end of one of those classes, one of the linemen, he was a senior lineman, he probably 30, 35 year employee, 20 years experience. And we always ask for feedback and a critique of the class, and if I need to change something, I'll be glad to change it if it's for the better. But
Yeah.
He told me, and his manager shared his critique. And he said it was a waste of his time. Been doing this 25 years, don't need to cover up anymore, don't need to do this, don't need to do that. And I said, well, I'll tell you where it's at, doesn't matter. I said, I'm sorry, but my 80-20 rule is what I go by. If I make 80% of the people feel like they took something away and it made them safer, then I'm okay.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't 6 months that manager called me back, and guess what? That guy got burned up. He had a phase in his hand, deadened it in on a hot pole for them to sag it on a new pole, 1-pole extension. And it was laying on the ground, and he got it in his hand with leather gloves on. He turns around in his bucket and backs into a hot switch and messed him up. Mm. And I told him, I said, well, I am so sorry. I wish he'd have believed what I told him 6 months ago, that it don't take just a second or two to cover something else up, whether you think you need it or not.
That's it.
That's
it, Danny.
And I get a lot of feedback. Lately, I just post a picture every once in a while just to see what kind of feedback I can get. And I have a lot of linemen, ride my case about, well, you don't need to do all that. So what do you do that for? I'm not going to be there. I'm over here. I said, well, would you ever need to go over there?
Yeah.
Would you ever have lost the focus and move over there unknowingly and forgetfully and put yourself in harm? No, not on purpose, but nobody does that stuff on purpose. And that's the point. That's what I always try to get through to people. We don't do this. This stuff don't happen on purpose. Yeah.
It doesn't. Let me go to another chapter here, Danny.
Sure.
You got some really good stuff here, and it seems like every chapter you have some lines here of wisdom that we can all take away from the experience. And here you say the human factor is the greatest challenge, and this is what you're talking about in the field today. Some linemen believe they know enough not to follow all the rules to get a job done. When this happens, the wheels fall off the wagon, things go wrong. I spend much of my time training on human performance. No one does things intentionally to hurt themselves or a coworker, but it happens daily. The why, and that's the question you said a little bit ago. The why is what I have been trying to determine. We are all human and we all make mistakes, no matter how good we are or think we are. It does not matter how many times we have performed the same task. Near the end of the next book, I will recount some of these cases I have been asked to depose on for opinions and accidents that I have been asked to investigate. You may be shocked as to whom things happen to and how much experience they have. And that's what you're talking about right there.
Yeah, well, one of the last employees at the company I work for, and he was a friend of mine, his wife, I guess she's retired now, but he was a 36-year employee. He was what we call a troubleman, a single individual contributor. He worked by himself. And, he, as good as he was, 36 years, been doing it and been working by himself for 10, 12, 13 years probably. Mm-hmm. So when you're by yourself, you don't have anybody looking over your shoulder, You got to do it right every time. Well, anyway, he had a phase down on a 3-phase pull-off, and he got out there, and his supervisor or somebody got out there with him, and he says, "Oh, this phase is down. It locked the breaker out." So he said, "Well, go down there. There's a gang switch." And he knew where it was at. No switching order, nothing. He said, "Go down there and open that gang switch and de-energize this line. We make the breaker back hot, and I pick this phase up, and we'll be okay." Well, he went down there and he opened the switch and checked all 3 blades in the clear and locked it and put a tag on it and come back down there to where Charlie was working. And they made the breaker back hot. And 3-phase line, it was another industrial part. So he went and he started working his way up. Now, the pull off, he was on the roadside, pull off was on the backside, field side. And he got the face, spliced it, and he started working it up to where he could just, all it was one span. So he was going to take some rope jacks or jack straps, whatever you want to call them, and just sag it up and tap it back up. What they didn't see, the guy that opened the switch, nor he, was on that pole. The gang switch pole was 1 or 2 spans below him. He opened the gang switch. A transformer was 1 pole, the other side of the gang switch on the line side of it, still hot. And so it fed through the gang switch pole and on down the street, caught 2 or 3 street lights. So he's up there trying to get that number 2 ACSR up to feed the 3-pump bank, 1 phase down. And he got in series because they didn't open the jacks on the switches or nothing on the bank. So he's got his hand on the hot 120 volt secondary street line, and he's got the number 2 ACSR going to the bank. So he got in series, picked up the transformer through him, killed it. 36-year employee.
Man.
No verification, you know.
Wow.
Oh, gang switch is open, so it's de-energized. You know, that happened a long time ago. That happened 20-something years ago.
Mm.
It happened, a long time ago. And
yeah,
I mean, those things like that are indelible in my mind. I mean, you know, gosh, I wish I could have been there, and maybe I'd have seen it. I don't know. Maybe I wouldn't have. Might have been something like somebody else. But again, too, it's very predictable, but very unforgivable. You just don't make mistakes like that.
Yeah. Well, you got one last story here, Danny, that I'd like to share. Sure. And have you comment on it. And I call this story the point of the auger. And the point of the auger is these things are predictable. They really are predictable. And if we would just question and like you said, not assume, but when we're driving something in the ground or we're putting our hand on a particular piece of equipment or a component of a circuit, again, we must assume the very worst case scenario. And if we do, then we're going to take those steps to eliminate, mitigate, substitute, right? But the point of the auger, I'll just pick this right up. The point of the auger punctured the main. Gas started escaping, and as everyone attempted to move back, the movement of the bucket caused the hot phase to create a small arc, igniting the gas. He died in the natural gas fire, and the fire was 20 feet or more from the ground. He could not escape before the bucket boom burned, killing him. He fell to the ground when the bucket and the boom burned and melted. It was a horrible accident and only happened due to personal initiative of attempting to do a job. Get her done, Danny. Always be safe and never take chances without proper locates. He was trying to do a great job, but did not follow the rules and paid the ultimate sacrifice. Yep.
Yeah, that was, I did not have to investigate that one or anything. I thought about it when I was writing a book, and it's one of those things where linemen are linemen are linemen. We want to do everything we can and finish it while we can. At least that was my philosophy back in the day. One of the hardest things I ever to do was get somebody to cut a set of bells in a pull-off or a phase and make it hot up to there and come back the next morning and start and pick it back up from there. Because they didn't want to stop. They wanted to keep working. You got to go get some break. But in this case right here, he took 3 poles out that morning to change out 340s to 345s. He got 2 of them changed out, didn't have a problem. Got to the 3rd location, there was no locates. And so he says, "No, we ain't taking this new pole back. I'm going to untie everything and let it float, pull it off. I'm going to go up there with my material handling jib and my roller head, and I'm going to put that phase in there, and I'm going to back up. I want y'all to pull this pole." There's a 3-man crew. So the 2 on the ground pull the pole out, and then they augered it out, but they had to hand dig it first to get down below where they thought everything was, the other utilities. And then the only thing they was going to do is stick that auger in there and clean that dirt out to where they could get the larger butt pole in there. And when they stuck that auger in there, and he made about 3 turns on that auger, the point of that auger was a 4-inch plastic gas main that the gas contractors had gone underneath our poles because it was a lot of rock in the area. And they found that place right there where we'd blown it out probably to set that pole. So that's where they went. And that auger went in there and it punctured it. And that was another extremely sad situation. I think that young man I used to do the new hire compliance, regulatory safety compliance training. Every month I would have them. And I think he was in one of the last classes I taught before I retired. And this happened about 4 years later.
Wow. That's hard, Danny.
Trying to do the right thing, wanting to be the productive person, you know.
I know.
No good deed ever goes unpunished. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's where stop job authority comes in. If it's not marked, man, you got to stop the job. And what's interesting, you called this chapter More Storms and Trouble. And, let's not look at storm work as far as the physical. Let's look at storm work as far as what we cause, our own minds and our mindset and our own drive. It seems like everything we're talking about here, Danny, is we're creating our own storms and we're creating our own trouble with our own mind and our attitudes when we're out there in the field. And that's what we're seeing.
Well, that's when I introduce myself, especially to a bunch that never seen me before, never heard me. I introduce myself as the why guy. Mm-hmm. You know what to do, but why are you doing what you're doing? And how did you learn how to do what you're doing? And that's why. Why would you ever take a chance like that with your family? Mm-hmm. I would dare say no. Would you ever put your family in harm's way intentionally? No. So how do you know, how do you really know that it's safe to do what you're doing? The only way you can do is follow the rules, regulations, and policies and the work procedures that you have been trained to do. If you start varying off that road, you get outside them white lines. There's no guarantee. Now, can you do it and get away with it? Sure you can. I did it for years. But, I guess an educated chance or whatever. But, as I went on later on in life, I found out, no, none of this is worth it. Yeah. Boasting of what I get done, my accomplishments or anything else. I mean, no, it's not worth it. Don't take the chance. Just do what you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do it.
So, Mr. Danny, we need a couple of words of wisdom. First, I'd like you, our trade is losing so many of the older folks and the wisdom of the older folks. And most of the older folks that are in our trade that I've met, maybe the majority of them, and I hate to say this, but the majority of them, they're like counting the minutes until they retire. Uh-huh. And yet they're not leaving the line legacy that we're supposed to leave as far as a positive growth and a positive blueprint, what I call a line legend behind. And what would you say, what would you console the apprentices of today? Give us some wisdom that you, after seeing everything, all these decades of line work and these apprentices coming today, and a lot of them, Danny, are being force-fed, quickly trained, and before you know it, a lot of these guys, because so many folks are leaving, they become a foreman. And it's like, how are they a foreman? But what would you say to the apprentices today?
Well, I could say a lot, but we've already about an hour and 4 minutes now, so I can't say too much. But anyway, laying all jokes aside, don't rush yourself because just somebody. Well, one thing about it, I see a lot of posting on social media. Well, I've got I've got my journeyman ticket. And a lot of times I'll say, congratulations. Now then you can go learn the rest of what you need to learn to be safe and work a long career. Like I said, the last several fatalities that I've had to deal with were young linemen. And a couple of them on contract crews were they had a certificate from a vocational technical school and about 2 years on a crew, and they called it, they were classified as B-class linemen. Not sure I know what that is. The only thing I say is learn what you can, find somebody that knows what they're doing, and if you ever have any doubt about what they're doing, ask somebody else to verify. Again, test and verify. None of us know everything there is to know. I had somebody ask me a question the other day. I said, gotta go look that one up. I don't claim to know everything, never will know everything that you need to know. Just got a lot of stories and a lot of t-shirts, okay? But don't rush yourself. Learn what you can. Find you a mentor. You know, when I made supervisor, the first time I made supervisor, I had a mentor for me. And he said, Danny, what's the first thing you need to do as a field supervisor? God, my head was spinning like a top. You know, I knew how to do the work, but now I got to get people to go do the work. And I said, I got a lot. He said, well, one of the first things you need to consider, who's going to take your place? What? I just got here. No, he said, but you won't be here forever. And somebody has to fill those shoes. Who are you going to get to fill your shoes? You need to find somebody and help them help themselves and prepare that. And if I had a piece of advice, that would be it.
That's awesome. I like it, Danny. Man, Danny, thanks so much for sharing your time and your talent and your passion with all the folks here. And I'm excited that folks are going to be able to go into line crews, are going to be able to go into your live wire story and replay and relive what you've done, so that a lot of the stories and a lot of the situations that you went through, they're not going to experience, but they are going to experience the happy times and the good things that you also wrote in your book. And that's really what we want them to experience. And appreciate you being here, brother.
No problem at all. Glad to help. Anytime I feel like if I can help somebody help themselves or give them a piece of advice, you know, you can go to my website, DannyLRains.com, and you got all my information, links to everything there. We're going to eventually have Q&A questions there, to where if you have a question, you just want my opinion on something, I'll answer it. Whatever I can do for you. But it's a pleasure, it's an honor, and it humbles me that you asked me to come do this. And I'll be glad to do it anytime. I look forward to seeing you next week in South Carolina to do the contractor management.
Yeah, no, thank you, Danny, and look forward to seeing you next week, brother.
All right, sir.
Break a little bread. Break a little bread and have a nice meal with you and have a great conversation. That'd be awesome.
That'd be great. Looking forward to it.
Thank you, brother.
Stay safe out there, guys.
Take care, man. Thank you.